So a while ago in the podcast, we explored some of the challenges that organisations typically face in becoming much more customer-centred, and how they go about building design capabilities and a culture to create products and services that really add value. And I wanted to go back into this topic and learn from a design leader who's worked within agencies, government organisations and global brands to bring about change and build customer experience capabilities from the ground up. So today on CXC, I'm really delighted to be joined by Jeanette Clement, who is Head of Service Design at the BT Group, and before that, the Head of User Research, and before that, the Head of Design at Parliamentary Digital Service, which is part of the UK civil service that supports and scrutinises the UK government. So Jeanette, you have such a broad experience working across all sorts of organisations. It is fantastic to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, thanks, Ollie. Great to be here.
So as the head of service design in a global organisation like BT, so broadly speaking, what are the responsibilities there? Because it sounds like it's a lot about how you kind of change culture, how you set teams up, getting things going. Is that the kind of the day-to-day job?
When I actually first started at BT, I started as Head of User Research and Accessibility, a very different role to the one I've got now. And there were not any service designers. We started with just pivoting to product designers to service design, and really proved out the value of service design in that way. And we slowly, through demonstrating the value of these disciplines, scaled user research from what was like 4 user researchers in very big design capability to what it is now, about like 18, 19 user researchers and 14 service designers. That became quite a big role for me to do service design and user research. So we brought in the fabulous Sharon Gandhi, who's now the Head of User Research. So I get to focus on scaling service design, and I would say that role is really about creating the right environment for design to have impact in the organisation. So it's quite a broad spectrum, the job that I do now.
It was really interesting to hear that in BT you talked about kind of pivoting to product designers or to UX designers into service design, and kind of proving the case for doing it. That feels like a very sort of gently approach. Is that one of the ways you've found that it's best to help these things kind of take root and begin to grow?
There's definitely no one just like sitting with a big pot of money that's like, oh, great, service design. Let's hire 10 service designers. In my experience, it is quite often through really tangibly showing the value of this discipline, how it can help connect the dots in such a complex workplace. Connecting the dots is almost a superpower, being able to bring people across boundaries to agree on things. Showing the value of those design activities, bringing people into that process is the way to help release funds and headcount for the disciplines. But it's this discipline that still doesn't have a very broad understanding compared to UX design or interaction design or even user research.
It feels at times that service design is like an enormous sort of like collaboration engine, and it really is about getting out to the organisation, understanding things, bringing people together. You used the term before about joining the dots, and that seems to be a critical theme in everything to do with service design and customer experience design, to understanding what's been done, what could be done, who is doing what, and kind of bringing that thread together between all those things and understanding how best to optimize it. In what way do you think service design now is beginning to kind of shape sort of strategic thinking, strategic initiatives at BT Group? Is it finding of kind of a place at the table? Have you your influence on that culture, that customer-centered thinking, has that permeated up and into the board and the way that they think about things?
You talked about it being a collaboration engine, but I also think equally an important role of service design is being like a convergence engine. Our role as designers is to help the business to make decisions, and quite often there can be a lot of different opinions. You can go through lots of collaboration, but it is that convergence and that decisiveness and the clarity of the recommendations that we're making at the end of the day that's going to get things done, that's going to get things delivered, that's going to create change in the organisation. And I actually think that's perhaps more valued by the organisation than the collaboration part. We know the collaboration is a really important part of that process to get people to those decisions, and they've felt part of it, they've been on that journey, but being able to provide the clarity on like, this is what we've decided, this is the evidence behind those decisions, I think is a really sort of undervalued part of the service design role.
That's fascinating. This idea of convergence, managing opinions, getting clarity. So how typically how do you go about doing that within the organisation?
Probably like three different ways. There's, as I mentioned, bringing people into the process, bringing them into user research, bringing them into design activities. For the harder to reach people, then you have to be very good at bringing those insights into your outputs, into your deliverables, making sure that there are regular like mini playbacks. If you're not going to be able to get the right people, those hard to reach people, into the activities, then how might we at least get what is the minimum we can get them to? Is that a playback at the end of each week? And making sure that in those activities, in those playbacks, we are bringing in a variety of insights. Stakeholders tend to really like respond very well to metrics and measurements. So making sure you've got a blend of metrics and measures that will resonate with them, using language that will maybe have more impact. So, for example, calling out a risk of propensity to call might have more impact than talking about a user pain point. So, using the business language. And I think just the other thing we've been thinking about in terms of really making sure that we have that impact is being where the people are. So using the tools like Jira to make sure insights and recommendations are used in the spaces that people are the decision makers are spending most of their time. There's no point just having like a really flash deck that gets circulated after a talk. It will get forgotten about.
So for those who aren't familiar with Jira, could you explain a little bit more about that?
Jira's it might be a tool that a lot of designers have a sort of a bit of an allergic reaction to, but it is where backlogs are managed. It is where a lot of things are documented, and a lot of decisioning gets actioned. We've been learning a lot from the accessibility team recently, who actually came and spoke to user research and service design about how they manage their recommendations in Jira. And things will be, if things fail at accessibility standard, they'll be flagged as a P1 or a P2, just as any other like bug would. And so we're learning a lot at the moment from how accessibility have really moved towards use the tools that product leads and product owners and the business analysts are using. And so I think as service designers, it's important that we lean into those tools as well.
You mentioned before, weren't you, about kind of integrating. So either integrating by bringing people into the process, or making sure that you're kind of getting into the process. And it seems like that's a real key lesson about using the tools and the forums that the business has, and making sure that you're situating within that your observations, insights, recommendations. You can't be over there just talking about stuff. You have to kind of position it all in ways that people can understand, and make it accessible to them, so it can kind of inform their decision making. That's a real skill.
You've got to make it really simple for people to make decisions. Like, what can we do? How can we communicate this that makes it like a no-brainer for people to make those decisions? It makes it an easy choice. Take all of the hard work out of making that decision. But yeah, it is. I honestly believe like negotiation skills, communication skills, like they're really, really important skills for triangulating data and visualizing data. Are really important skills for service designers.
So when you're sort of embarking on beginning to build this capability within an organisation, and perhaps thinking back now over the numerous times you've been involved in doing it, are there a set of challenges that you've found moving people over into being more customer centered?
For sure, there are definitely plenty of challenges. You've touched on some pertinent ones there, and it does really vary in different parts of the organisation. There's one part of the organisation that was very tech led. Maybe I'm looking back, thinking back about 3 years ago now, and we've seen quite a big transformation from them being security first, technology first, to actually talking about outcomes in their goals, customer outcomes in their goals. So there are different pockets of maturity, I would say. The way that we've particularly organised the service design team, and it's mirrored in the user research team actually, is we have clusters of squads. So squads are product designers, content designers, product owner, engineering representative, and they will be in clusters of tribes, and those tribes are oriented around like key parts of the business. So you might have get broadband, get mobile, shop, identity, so very quite broad areas that all have their slightly different cultures, slightly different makeups, different stakeholders, different areas of the business. Shop or marketplace, for example, is very new and doesn't have any of the sort of like legacy technology, or as many of the legacy technology issues. And so they have like a greater freedom to move at a different cadence and work more iteratively. So it's definitely a sliding scale, no matter where you look in the organisation. Some of the common challenges normally come down to quite things that are quite tough to change in a large organisation, like how things are funded. Like the funding mechanism can sometimes get in the way of being able to work on the right, the thing that you think is important at that moment, or being able to work in an iterative way, or being able to work across your boundaries, the way that work flows through the organisation. Different people can be working on it at different times, so that can be probably the biggest challenge that we have. I talk a lot to my team about not trying to swim against the tide, trying to catch the waves. We've done a lot of work in the last year or two to really understand what that funding process looks like. How does work flow through the business from marketing? How is it funded? And we've tried to move service design to have some design activities earlier in the process, even if it's quite lightweight and tactical. understanding the things that are important, the things that are important to stakeholders, having that awareness of those things can make it easier for us to engage in those things. So as designers, we quite often like see all of the problems all of the time, right? And that can be quite hard. But if what you can do is focus on the things that there is a wave, there's some momentum behind at the time, that can make it much easier for you to have some impact there, to add some value.
I love that term, catch the wave, don't swim against the tide. I think that's brilliant. That epitomizes the whole thing. And perhaps it's that skill, that skill to kind of work out the difference between the two. I mean, think about it, like with surfers or whatever, there'll be people who are flailing around in all the way trying to catch every single one of them and exhaust themselves, and then there's the real experienced one that just spots it a mile out and is ready for it, and off they go. Let's go with this analogy bit. I love it. So how does that translate? So you give this advice to people to kind of catch the wave, don't swim against the tide. What advice do you give them in order to begin to kind of develop that skill?
I think it's actually a bit more of we have a process that we use that helps to make those decisions easier. So we have initially we did not have briefs for our service designers. It was just paddle around in that water and like catch the waves. But actually, what's really hard with service design is to also understand how to stop, when to stop, or what the scale of that is. You can just keep going and going and going. So one of the things we sort of introduced to help us to be clearer about the right waves to catch, and what is a very simple briefing system. So working with the product leads to be clear about like what does good look like. Let's think about a boundary of 3 months. What does good look like at the end of this? So then you start to call out some, people immediately go to like the deliverables. So we want a journey map, we want a service blueprint map. But then you can dig into other questions like, what is the outcome? What does the outcome for users look like? How might we measure success? Who are the people that are involved in this work that can make changes to this service? What existing research has happened already? So we've got like 6 questions. It's almost a conversational tool that helps you to be clear. Like, okay, so there is real customer value we can add here, or there's a real efficiency to the business that we can create here. We believe that's achievable within this time frame, and we know the right people to work with. And we've almost got like a little decision tree that we take the different briefs through and go, right, that's the right thing to work on. And sure, things might change, but it starts us working in the right way.
Yeah, that's really that's very smart. I love this idea of having that simple briefing system, a structured conversation with people, and it's really about setting the project up for success. Are you in the enviable position to be able to choose what your teams work on? So if you're coming across an internal client that maybe isn't clear about what they want or why they want it or how it will help, can you kind of go, oh, you're not probably quite ready to work with us yet, we need to do a bit of preparatory work with you, or is it just like, no, it's come down the line, we have to work on it, do your best?
That's a good question. It definitely is a process of like negotiation. There has been times when we've said, no, I think this is like product designers, a product designer could work on this. I don't think you need a service designer. I don't think we can add a significant amount of additional value on this. It also depends who the stakeholder is. I don't there's certain things that we might have like identified, and we think these are the right, this is the right thing to work on, but actually no one has asked us to work on it, and those are almost like the tougher things to work on, because you're starting to move into a space where no one has given you permission to. So that was what was coming back to earlier about the challenges of understanding the right work to work on. It's not turning down things, because you can negotiate that and shape something into the right type of work. The more common problem is, okay, this is a big issue for users, customers, but this isn't an initiative that's in a backlog anywhere, so you've got to try and get momentum on something.
It's clear, isn't it, when you're sort of building a capability, one of the things you've got to be able to do, come the end of the year, so to speak, is to look back and to be very clear about the value that it's added and what it's achieved. There will probably be some things that you need to kind of step back from, because you can't easily demonstrate the impact. It's a big ask. It's something on the fringes. I'm very conscious of this in the agency side of things, where you kind of almost have this kind of like 80-20 rule, where 80% of your work is really in your sweet spot. You know how to do it. You can really add value there. All guns blazing. You have everything you need to really make a difference there. And then there's 20% of work where you're kind of going, oh, that's really interesting. That's something a bit different. It's going beyond where we are. Maybe it's going in a direction that we're kind of curious about. And this might be a slightly tougher project to do, and that kind of thing. Agents in the past will use those sort of 20%ers to use them strategically. Maybe it's about taking them in a direction they haven't yet gone in. It's a new sector. It's a new challenge that's being asked. But I wonder, with your sort of in your internal hat on, do you get a similar sense that there are some of those? There's mainstream project works that your service design teams are doing, and then there's the 20%ers which are pushing the boundary somewhere, and what's the not the details, what's the nature of that work? Is it something different? Is it
actually quite radical things for us tend to be demonstrating a new way of working, like prototyping out a future vision, to use prototyping as a tool to show what something could look like in 2 years ahead. That can really confuse people, because they associate a prototype with something that's going to be delivered now, or they expect it to be something that they're like, we haven't created the requirements yet for this. Why would you build this? Why would you be creating this prototype for something that we don't know is possible? We don't know how much it'll cost. So some of the quite radical things for us is actually trying to just change that culture, that way of working, creating stimulus to learn from, and then working back from that, rather than big upfront planning of what should we build today, tomorrow, trying to push those boundaries of what is the right thing to build in 2 years' time. Trying to stretch the imagination of people and think about the experience, that minimum viable experience, but also that future experience that can be quite radical when you're not used to working in that way. And so sometimes we will do that work knowing that that hasn't literally been asked for us to do that work, but it's important to do that work and bring people along and understand and help them to understand why it's valuable.
It's interesting here. You talk about the challenges. So the challenge of imagination within the business, and therefore the need to kind of prototype stuff to bring it to life, so people can go, oh, okay, I get that, I understand that. It was also interesting. You touched on it when you spoke about some highly sort of technologically led projects, and again, it reminds me of a challenge that we've often observed within organisations, and we refer to it as this idea of the sort of the challenge of fast and slow. And there are some things like technology and UX that can move very, very quickly. You can change something very fast and get it out there, and people that are involved in that activity are have a real let's do it kind of attitude, and I can have this done by tomorrow. It's all about what's in the backlog, what's the most valuable, let's get that done. And then there are things in organizations that have a slower kind of metabolic rate, which is around kind of ways of working. It's all the human stuff, it's the decision making, it's the culture and that kind of thing. So I'm interested to understand what, thinking about that sort of that slow stuff, which is about kind of culture and ways of working. What have you come across in that space that is painful for the organisation to deal with, and how do you go about helping them to kind of get to that process? It feels like from a straight up UX point of view, your team can match pace and lead the running on any one of those initiatives. But when it comes back into perhaps more human things, that could be more challenging.
I think some of the challenges that of moving fast and slow is just about being able to have that omni-channel sync up across the boundaries, and having a separate digital department from another part of the organisation can sometimes be less helpful in having that sync up. So we're going to talk about connecting the dots. One of the valuable things that service design can do there is bring people together across those boundaries, and whether we're working in making changes to contact center or retail or digital, making sure we're talking to each other about what that experience is like for customer. We've known for a long time that customers don't just stay within one channel, that they ping pong across channels to get their job done. But as an organisation, we're not set up that way. So one of the really valuable things that we need to is bring people together from the customer experience team that's working on contact centre, the team that are making decisions in retail, use tools to understand what those journeys are like. So whether it's the cadence of how we work, I think that's the thing that stays constant, is that need, and we're definitely seeing a positive trend towards that recently. Tribes being called omni tribes. I think the business does recognise that, but it is just incredibly hard to cross those boundaries, and so that's why service design's role is to help us to raise people above those boundaries, no matter how you set up, rise above those boundaries and just talk to each other, and those design activities can be really useful in providing that sort of neutral ground to talk to each other.
I love your terminology, squads and tribes. You're mixing sporting analogies and cultural analogies. It's great. Yeah. You've done this in lots of organisations, and there are going to be people listening to this show which are sort of setting out now on this journey to begin to develop more kind of user-centred approaches within their business, begin to work more with service design, trying to kind of build these capabilities. What advice would you give someone who is kind of setting out on that journey, and faces that challenge within an organisation, what advice would you give them about how to kind of go about doing that?
Definitely really get under the skin of how the business works, and really understand that the funding process, the things that you think might not have anything to do with you, they do have to do with you. They will influence your impact in some way. So try and get closer to them and understand them, and that is not easy. The other point of advice would be, it really does all start and finish with people. So build those relationships with, once you've understood how things work, identify the people that you really need to work with. You really need to understand how their area works, and build relationships with them. And that can feel like really awkward and hard, but put in one-to-ones with them, have them face-to-face if possible. That is how you really build rapport, and can have like the side chats and ask the more difficult questions that they might feel less comfortable saying over Teams. Particularly in a large organisation, it will really help you to get your job done. And if you're struggling to have impact, try and understand why, and find allies.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful advice, and put so well. I think it's what struck me through this conversation is it feels like there is, which I think you're exemplifying. Your team undoubtedly exemplify it. But it's this ability to sort of empathise, not only with customers, but also with colleagues and internal clients. And so this user-centeredness is more than just understanding the customer. It's about understanding the people and how you kind of support them, and this ability to connect with them and support those people in their goals. I think that's often unspoken, and I think that's come out really strongly in what you've been talking about. The thing that's going to stick with me, and I'm going to use it over and over again, is about, catching a wave and don't swim against the tide. And I think that is really, really smart advice. Yeah, it's advice for life, frankly, isn't it? Like that's what you've got to do. So yeah, from everybody here at Engine, Jeanette, to you, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed the chance to talk about things.
Great, thanks for having me.
Please don't forget to share and like CXD on all your channels. We'd love you to leave a review, so please do that, and catch up with us shortly for our next episode. Until then, Jeanette, thank you again. See you guys soon.